right. Good morning. Thanks for being here. This is the NPHL Packing and Shipping Dangerous Goods class for the local health departments. Thanks for being with me. My name is Ben. I'm the state training coordinator for the Nebraska Public Health Lab. I'll be the one teaching you this course today. So the goal of the course is to provide training on packaging and shipping Division 6.2 infectious substances, and we're going to cover a little bit of dry ice. It's a long course, a few hours in length. There is a bit of a post-test, which it's 10 questions, just asking for 8 out of 10 on that. But here's the agenda. Here's the things we're going to cover. We're going to kind of blow past introductions and stuff just for the sake of time. We are going to talk regulations, requirements, responsibilities, classification, identification, packing, marking, and labeling, and then documentation. And then we'll finish up for the day. So starting at the top there with our regulations, requirements, and responsibilities, there's some key terminology, and there's some key agencies we're going to talk about, as well as training requirements that you'll need to prove that you're certified to ship Category A packages, and the roles and responsibilities of those who are involved in packaging and shipping. So, key terminology, dangerous goods and hazardous materials. While they're very similar, they are distinct. Dangerous goods is an international term used in shipping and transportation. They are determined by the United Nations, the International Air Transport Association, and the International Maritime Organization. They refer to articles or substances that pose a risk to health, safety, property, or the environment during transportation. They cover the 9 UN hazard classes like explosives and gases and of course, infectious substances. And they're classified by the UN under the UN model regulations. And there's a specified dangerous goods list where you can find all of those materials. So then hazardous material, hazmat, similarly but separately. This is a term primarily used in the US. It's regulated by the DOT, the Department of Transportation, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, the EPA. These are materials that pose an unreasonable risk to health, safety, or property during handling, storage, and when transported in commerce. So it includes many of the same categories as dangerous goods. There's a lot of overlap, but it is framed by the US legal and regulatory language. And so again, it includes things like chemicals and biological agents and radioactive materials and toxic waste and, hazardous materials. So just a quick recap. The differences between the two: hazardous materials mainly used in the US. It's overseen by DOT, OSHA, and EPA. It includes storage in the primary concerns, not just handling and transport. And so it's broader than the dangerous goods because it includes workplace hazards. And dangerous goods is international, set by the UN, refers mainly to those substances during transport. So again, it focuses on transportation risks. So similar definitions or similar terms, but some key differences. And this is what we're talking about when we say Division 6.2 infectious substances. So under the UN model regulations, there's 9 classes of dangerous goods. You can see here, explosives, gases, flammable liquids, toxic and infectious substances is class 6. And then that is further broken down into divisions. Division 6.1, poisonous material, and 6.2, infectious substances. Class 9, I should mention as well, that contains miscellaneous hazards. That's where we're going to find our dry ice. So you will have to mark a package for both Division 6.2 and Class 9 when shipping those two things together. Other things found in Class 9 would be like lithium batteries or non-pathogenic GMOs and like some magnetized items. magnetized materials, I suppose you could say. So that's division 6.2, which then can further be broken down into subcategories. So division 6.2, infectious substances, you've got category A and category B, and exempt human specimens, and we'll talk about those exempt human specimens. But category A substances are infectious substances capable of causing permanent disability, life-threatening, or fatal disease in otherwise healthy individuals with a normal immune response. These things will make them sick. So they're assigned to UN 2814, infectious substances affecting humans. And then there's also UN 2900, infectious substances affecting animals. We'll talk about the distinction there later. And then there's category B, which are biological substances that don't quite meet the criteria for category A, but could still pose a risk. So typically these are clinical specimens or diagnostic samples like blood and urine, where the presence of an infectious agent is suspected but not confirmed. And then down at the bottom there, we've got exempt human and animal specimens, which are specimens, human specimens, unlikely to contain pathogens. These would be things like routine blood tests or diagnostic samples where you're not looking for an infectious or biological substance, but the odds are never zero that there could be one there. So here are some of our agencies. Talked about a few of these. You got the United Nations. They provide the general framework for the classification, labeling, and transport of dangerous goods around the world. The International Civil Aviation Organization, they're an agency of the United Nations that establish the technical instructions for the safe transport of dangerous goods by air for international aviation. So they kind of take what the UN writes and then apply standards and practices and write the technical rule book on what to do. Then there's IATA, the International Air Transport Association. They take those rules from the International Civil Aviation Organization and they add airline-specific requirements for shipping hazardous materials by air. And then there's the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code. They regulate the transport of hazardous goods by sea. And then the WHO, they provide safety protocols for transporting infectious substances as well. So every one of these organizations kind of write their own book, even though they all borrow heavily from each other. And most of them are going to follow IATA because they're kind of like the strictest organization of the group. So I should mention here that ICAO, the WHO, and IATA are not enforcement agencies, so they can't come after you. But they establish regulations that are enforced by federal or territorial regulatory agencies. So, for example, the United States, the DOT and the Federal Aviation Administration, they're regulatory agencies, so they do enforce hazardous materials transportation. So they can and do perform inspections and enforce regulations that are set by the international bodies we just talked about, if that makes sense. So, yeah, DOT will use IATA rules and perform inspections and make sure you're following DOT rules, but IATA will not come after you. Whatever the equivalent would be in London would be the responsible party for performing inspections and making sure you're following the rules, but not IATA. So here's their manual that they publish annually. This is where they, publish any changes to their packing and shipping protocols. If there were to be any changes over a given year, it's called the Dangerous Goods Regulations Manual. It costs money to print. It's like 400, 500 pages long. You can find bits of it online for free, but generally it does cost a fee. And I'll mention again that overall, the standards that are set forth in this Dangerous Goods Manual are generally the most restrictive and universal. And so they can be considered the international gold standard because most countries write their rules off of these standards. So if you're following IATA rules and regulations, you're almost guaranteed to be doing everything the correct way no matter what country you're in, because most countries set their standards based on IATA. WHO, they publish their guidance every 2 years, and they take their stuff from the ICAO technical instructions. This one's free. Like I mentioned, WHO is not a regulatory agency. They just kind of publish the rules and regulations. Then there's the DOT stateside. Like I mentioned, the Department of Transportation is the entity in the US that oversees hazardous material shipments, and they take their rules from the Code of Federal Regulations. So Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, to be more specific, they require people who are shipping hazardous materials in the U.S. to follow regulations and standards issued by IATA, the Dangerous Goods Regulations. So packing and shipping and labeling requirements for the DOT are almost identical to IATA because they are taken from IATA, but there's just a couple extra exceptions in the Code of Federal Regulations when shipping by ground. And as I mentioned, the DOT and the FAA, if you're shipping by air, enforce the regulations in the US so they can and do perform inspections. Maybe 3 or 4 months ago, DOT came and did an inspection here, make sure everyone had their certification. So yeah, if you Google Code of Federal Regulations, this is what you will find. That Chapter 1, Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, Department of Transportation. That's where you're going to find the rules and regulations set forth by the DOT. And then there's the US Postal Service, who has their own publication called Publication 52, which applies to biological materials shipped through US mail. The US Post Office will not carry a Category A infectious substance. They will take a Category B as long as you packaged it, meeting off all of Chapter 1 of 49 Code of Federal Regulations packing requirements. That was a mouthful. And it's got to be shipped via first class mail, priority mail, or express service because those services offer tracking. You can track the package. And then similar to IATA rules and regulations, non-infectious patient specimens have to have that exempt human specimen marking, and we'll talk about that more. So the USPS, they set their own regulations in Publication 52, and they're also their own regulatory agencies. So they do their own inspections outside of the DOT. So just a quick note about USPS there. And then you got commercial carriers like FedEx and UPS. These carriers are IATA members, so they follow IATA rules. So when you're shipping via commercial carrier, you need to follow IATA rules. Sometimes they have like their own boxes available to make sure that everything is meeting regulations and standards. And again, they have tracking systems, so you can track your packages. And generally, they just accept a broader range of materials because they're well versed in moving hazardous materials. So that's it for carriers. Oh, well, no, there's one. Private carriers, or like these would be like your hospital couriers that shuttle specimens from like a clinic to the reference lab or there's abouts. According to the DOT, so that's according to Code of Federal Regulations, Title 49, 173.134, subsection B10. It's an exception for a private carrier. It says when transporting by private or contract carrier, a patient's specimen other than a Category A infectious substance transported for research, diagnosis, investigational activities, or treatment is not subject to packing marking and labeling requirements, and other hazmat regulations. When that vehicle is used exclusively to transport such materials, the vehicle must not be used for other purposes during transport and must not carry any other goods. So immediately after that, this does not apply to Category A infectious substances. So what this means is that you have a private courier, you don't have to have like the Category B labelings and markings on the outside of the package, but everything still needs to be triple packaged. We'll talk about triple packaging and we'll talk about labels, but we put this up top so later on down the road, maybe I can clear it up a little bit, but what this means is for patient specimens only, not cultures, and we'll talk about that. As long as they're triple packaged, they do not need to be specially marked and labeled. To go on a private courier, so long as that courier isn't stopping to pick up lunch, isn't stopping to pick up passengers, it's got to be specifically for those patient specimens. This, I don't want to say it confuses a lot of people, but this is one of the tougher concepts to understand. So it requires you understanding the difference between patient specimen and a culture, and triple packaging and our marking and labeling. So we'll circle back around to this, but I just wanted to introduce the concept to you up front. We're not going to spend too much time here, but these are just some of the things that we just talked about. If things are being transported by land, water, or railway in the U.S., the DOT is the responsible party. They follow the Code of Federal Regulations. If it's being shipped by air or it's going international, even in the U.S., if something is being shipped via airplane in the U.S., you have to follow IATA, dangerous goods regulations. So that's the difference. If it's going by car or, FedEx van, DOT, if it's going by air or if it's going international, it's IATA. And then if you're going to send something through the U.S. Postal Service, you have to follow their publication 52, but you can't ship Category A. Quick recap there. Another quick recap. ICAO establishes the technical instructions. IATA takes those, refines them, makes them more strict. DOT then takes those regulations, writes them into their Code of Federal Regulations that they follow, and that exception that other than Category A, patient specimens are exempt from marking and labeling requirements when transported by a private carrier that is used exclusively to transport such materials. So that is the end of regulations. And then next, we're going to go into training requirements. So these are going to be roles and responsibilities, who needs to be trained, what you need to do to be trained, how often you need to be trained, and employer responsibilities. So these are the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved in the packaging and shipping conveyor belt. We'll say, so shippers, you're a shipper if you're involved with any step of the packing and shipping dangerous goods. So this includes classifying, identifying the shipping name, packaging the thing, marking and labeling the box, and filling out the documentation. Sometimes labs who have send outs departments, they will separate that out into separate steps. But if you have any role in any of those first steps, you're considered a shipper. Carriers obviously load, transport, and deliver the packages, hopefully safely. Recipients, obviously the people who receive the package, they are responsible for inspecting for any damage or possible leaks or anything, and verifying that what's inside is what they say was inside. And then the employers of all of these people they're the ones responsible for making sure that staff is appropriately trained in their job functions. So it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that you are certified and meeting those requirements for certification. So we kind of just talked about this. If you pretty much touch a package anywhere along the way, or you're shipping something with greater than 5.5 pounds of dry ice, you need to be trained in how to properly do that. And here's how you get trained. So this is per the Department of Transportation, and IATA. So each employer is responsible for developing a hazmat training program. Um, and in addition to that, the employer is responsible for training and certifying their staff to package and ship dangerous goods. So what that means is your employer doesn't have to go out and actually build a hazardous materials training program in-house, but they need to find training that meets the qualifications to, they determine whether or not the training is acceptable enough to, certify you to package and ship. So there's different components. I'll try to explain that a little better in a minute. There's general awareness, familiarization training, which is what we're doing now. So we're going to talk about hazardous material regulations, requirements, classification, identification, everything we're going to talk about today. There's function-specific training, which covers requirements, exemptions, special permits. We're going to talk about a little bit about some of those things today, but primarily function-specific is going to be like your in-house training, facility-specific stuff. Similar with security awareness training. Safety training, this covers measures to protect employees from hazards associated with hazardous materials. And this includes the OSHA bloodborne pathogens training, which is a requirement of hazmat training. Remember, OSHA is one of the regulatory bodies for hazmat, and they require bloodborne pathogen training whenever you're shipping, infectious substances, which makes sense. So security awareness is making sure you're aware of the risks associated with dangerous goods transportation. And then in-depth security, that's going to be your facility security plan. Making sure everything stays secure during the packaging and shipping process. And then additional notes, dry ice is a dangerous good when it's shipped greater than 5.5 pounds. That's when it's going to fall under class 9, miscellaneous. So we're going to talk a little bit about dry ice and how you label and mark when you are shipping with dry ice today. This is an example of a hazmat employee training record. This will be available in the set of resources provided. This is an example, but you can go ahead and print this off and give it to your employer. And then, they talk about all the different training required. So today you could write down, general awareness, familiarization training, name and address of the trainer. That'd be my information. You write your test score down on there and the date trained, and then have your employer sign it at the bottom. And then, fill this out to meet all the requirements of hazmat training. So here's the difference between Category A and Category B certification. So for Category A, you do need that employer certification, something that says that you've been certified to ship Category A and you've met the hazardous materials training requirements. For Category B, you do not need that certification, but you need to know the requirements and you need to have infectious substance specific training, which is what we're doing today. And then you got to have a current completion of that training. And so everything else is the same for Category A, except for you need to have that employer certification if you're going to be shipping something Category A. If you're going to be doing anything in the packing and shipping process for Category A packages. According to IATA, you should be retrained every 2 years, DOT once every 3 years, but as with most responsibilities, new employees or those that have changed job function should train within 90 days. So here's the employer certification requirement. The employer must maintain training records for the duration of employment and then an extra 90 days. Make sure those records are available to an authorized DOT official upon request. These don't have to be kept physically. You can keep these digitally, but they need to be made available upon authorized request. So some of that stuff we already covered. So this is just an example of a fine that was uh, levied against, somebody who wasn't meeting the requirements of packaging and shipping. So it's $2,200 because they transported hazardous material while listing an unauthorized emergency response telephone number, failed to maintain a complete training record, offered and has transported a hazardous material accompanied by a shipping paper that failed to include the correct proper shipping. Pretty much everything wrong from start to finish on this, and it was a $2,200 fine. But fines do get more serious than that, especially if there's injury involved, which is a risk when shipping infectious substances. So, unfortunately, it's up to you to make sure that you're staying up to date on regulations. I will send things out to our lab sometimes, but like I said, each of these agencies publish their own regulatory manuals, and so things might change throughout the course of a year or over a couple of years. So just make sure, um, or reach out and ask if you're not sure where to figure out where some of these regulations might have changed over the last year. Um, get a hold of me. We'll try to make sure you're up to date. So that is training. Um, you need to have that general awareness, familiarization training, function specific safety, security awareness, in-depth security. So if you're a shipper, if you're doing anything involved in the packing and shipping process before the package leaves your facility, and employers are responsible for certifying and keeping training records of their employees. Okay, and we're going to stop there for a minute. Okay, and we're back. Now we're going to be talking about classification and identification. Um, this is the this is really the foundational step, first step in ensuring safe transport of dangerous goods because it determines how you're going to handle, package, and label and document and do everything to mitigate the risk of accidental escape or exposure. So, as the shipper, you're responsible for correctly classifying and identifying dangerous goods. This is how we determine if a substance is dangerous or hazardous and which of the 9 hazard classes it falls under. Um, and then this is how we assign the proper shipping name to our material. So we talked about this before, the 9 classes of dangerous goods. We're talking specifically Class 6, Division 6.2, Category A and Category B. And we will cover a little bit of dry ice. Uh, so when you begin classifying, you need to determine whether or not whatever you're dealing with falls into any of these 9 classes of hazardous material. And so they're each can have different rules and regulations. And obviously, today we're only focusing on Division 6.2, Category A and B. So we kind of covered all this stuff a little bit already. And then here's a little recap too. Category A is an infectious substance which is transported in a form that when exposure to it occurs, it can cause permanent disability, life-threatening, or fatal disease in an otherwise healthy, immunocompetent person or animal. We don't talk so much about UN 2900, the animal stuff, but it's out there. And category B is an infectious substance which does not meet the criteria for category A, but still poses some risk and should still be safely handled, packaged, and shipped. So some more terminology. This one's pretty key. Um, the difference between cultures and patient specimens. Cultures are the result of a process in which pathogens are intentionally grown. They're often isolated, they're propagated, they're pure. Um, they're used in research and diagnostics, but it's separate from a patient specimen because patient specimens are those collected directly from the patient. If this is, uh, blood tube, urine, tissues, they come directly from the patient. Nothing is done to the specimen to propagate whatever it is we are looking for. So it's going to be important to understand the difference between these two because it does change single organism or infectious substance. The category A or category B, can change depending on on the form that it's in. And so to do that, to make that determination, we use these indicative lists. There's one for IATA and one for DOT. They're examples of category A infectious substances. They're not exhaustive. It changes. Things go on the list, things fall off the list as we learn more about them. Um, some of these only affect animals. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner there, there's our indicative list for infectious substances affecting animals. And so you see, like at the top there, if we take a look at our first one, Bacillus anthracis, it's on the indicative list, but it's cultures only. So if you have, if somebody has a lesion on their arm and you're suspecting anthrax and you swab that lesion, well, that's a patient specimen. You are um, you're thinking it's going to be anthrax, but it's not a culture. It hasn't been propagated. It's not pure. So pay attention to whether or not you're shipping a patient specimen or a culture and how that affects how it's going to be classified, kind of depending on what it says here on this indicative list. And then we get to our exceptions or our not regulated materials. This is falling under the DOT. So if you're shipping something by ground, you can find it, it's on the exceptions. It's not regulated. These are materials or substances that do not contain infectious pathogens, or there's a minimal likelihood of having a pathogen present. So like if you draw somebody's blood for a cholesterol test, you don't know that there's no pathogens in there, but you're not expecting there to be. So, the odds are never zero. So there's a minimal likelihood, but you're not looking for that pathogen. So you're not collecting the specimen to find it. So we'll go through some examples of how these get classified. Uh, I guess some examples of this would be blood or blood components. That's not blood isn't, it's blood for transfusion or blood components for transfusion. Oftentimes because these are sterilized, they've been tested. So there's very minimal likelihood of having a pathogen present. Environmental specimens like water or soil, fecal occult blood cards, and routine clinical specimens all fall under this exceptions are not regulated list. And then exempt patient specimens, this is if you're shipping by air. This is according to IATA. They deem these same things as exempt patient specimens. Notice the words patient specimens. So you're going to have to use professional judgment, like medical history, symptoms, um, local endemic disease, and you're going to be using that triple packaging, which we're going to talk about, and then you need to include the words exempt human specimen. Medical waste, similarly, if you have a bin of medical waste and you know it contains a category A or category B substance, you have to ship it as such. Oftentimes wastes are decontaminated, and if that happens, they're not subject to dangerous goods regulations. You just ship them as normal. But if it's untreated, it's subject to regulations, and whatever's in it has to be classified and packaged according to its contents. So we're going to go through some job aids. These are included in the compressed file of resources. There's a different one for IATA and DOT, so it's important to pay attention, whether you think this is going to be going on a plane or if it's going to be shipped on the ground. We'll start with the IATA job tree. It's just basically a series of questions, an algorithm really to tell you, to kind of guide you as to how you're going to classify this. So you see under that first green yes on the left, it says this is a category A, and the middle one down at the bottom, it says this is an exempt human specimen. And then over on the side there, it's not regulated. And so we're going to be using this, and then we'll use our indicative list to classify whatever it is we are trying to ship. So if we're looking at some of these examples here, culture slant of Salmonella, we're going to use the IATA decision job tree to classify this. And we'll go through these just somewhat quickly for time's sake. So here's our job tree. Here's the questions we're asking. Have any pathogens been neutralized or inactivated? No, it's a culture slant of Salmonella. Is it known not to contain infectious substance? Or is it known not to contain an infectious substance? No, it does contain an infectious substance. It's Salmonella. We haven't, Salmonella is pathogenic for humans and animals. Well, I don't know about animals, but it's pathogenic for humans, so we answer no to that one. It's not a dried blood spot. It's not an environmental sample, and it's not for transplant or transfusion. So we say no to all of those. And that kicks us down to the left branch of our indicative list, where the next question we ask is, does it meet the definition of a category substance? Job aid, not indicative list. Does it meet the definition of a category A substance? This is where we're going to look at our indicative list to see if we can find salmonella on there. Um, and let's go to the next slide to do that. So we're looking for salmonella on our indicative list. And here I see Sabia virus and then Shigella. So no salmonella. So does it meet the definition of a category A substance? No. Is it a patient specimen? Is it a patient specimen, which there's only a minimal likelihood that pathogens are present? No, it's a culture slant of salmonella, so it's not a patient specimen, it's a culture. So this meets the classification of UN 3373 biological substance category B. It's pretty straightforward. um, it's just an algorithm you're following to make sure that you're classifying these things correctly. Now, things, like I said, do change. We had to actually reach out to the Department of Transportation Pipeline and Hazardous Materials branch about hantavirus to see how we were categorizing hantavirus. And I'll give you an updated example of what the final decision was on that in a second. I guess sorry, I kind of gave away the answers already, but if you wanted to pause here and go through these on your own, just to see kind of how you fare, um, this exercises like this will be on the quiz after, so be sure you're paying attention, especially whether you're shipping air or ground. That's the big one because there are subtle differences on the indicative list as well. So here's our indicative list. If we just look up hantavirus here real quick, it says hantavirus causing hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. Well, the Andes strain of hantavirus doesn't do that, so it's technically categorized as classified as a category B. Interesting to note. Similar to the IATA job tree, job aid, DOT has one. It asks similar questions. The difference is there's no exempt human specimen category. It's just not regulated or not subject to provision 6.2 packaging and shipping. So we'll go through an example of that too. So here using the DOT flowchart, we're going to look at a culture slant of suspected E. coli, verotoxigenic. We're going to ask all of these questions, again, very similar, except DOT adds in laundry or medical equipment, forensic material, and agricultural product. So that would be like a non-genetically modified organism food or something of the sort, non-GMO. So for a culture slant of suspected E. coli verotoxigenic, we're going to say no to all of these. Doesn't meet the definition of a category A substance. Bring our list back up. We're looking for E. coli, Escherichia coli, verotoxigenic cultures only. So it's a culture slant of verotoxigenic E. coli. So that does meet our definition of a category A substance. And so that is how that one will be shipped. So again, if you want to pause here and go through the rest of these using that DOT job aid, I am going to I'm going to run through these last two because there's some, if we remember back to that courier exception, I want to just point some things out here. So we got a urine cup from a new employee drug screen. I'm going to go back to kind of the beginning. Is it known not to contain an infectious substance? It's not known to not contain an infectious substance. Are the microorganisms present non-pathogenic to humans and animals? We don't know. Have the pathogens been present or neutralized? No. It's not an environmental sample. It's not a biological product. No to all is what we're going to say there.
Does it meet the definition of a category A substance? No. It's it's a urine cup for just a drug screen, I think. So then here we ask, is it a patient specimen that is unlikely to cause disease in humans or animals, or for which there's only a minimal likelihood that pathogens are present? Um, yes. So on the job tree, let me find the full thing. On the job tree, when you say yes to that big question, it's going to get kicked up and it's not subject to the requirements of Division 6.2, Code of Federal Regulations, because it's a patient specimen for which only there's a minimal likelihood of pathogens present. So if we go back through and then we ask ourselves all these same questions for the nasopharyngeal swab from a patient suspected of having COVID-19, well, it changes things a little bit. We're still going to say no to all of these because we are expecting it to have COVID-19 in it. That's pathogenic. It hasn't been neutralized. It's not any of these. Does it meet the definition of a category A substance? No. It's a patient specimen that's unlikely to cause disease in humans. Well, it's a patient specimen, but we're expecting COVID-19, so there's more than a minimal likelihood that pathogens are present. But the second stanza here, or is it a patient sample transported by private or contract carrier in a motor vehicle used exclusively for these materials? So that's going to go back to that courier exemption we talked about earlier. And so that is why this, even though it's suspected of having COVID-19, is still going to be not regulated or accepted. So pay attention to the difference between IATA and DOT. IATA has exempt human specimen, and DOT just says not regulated. Okay, there's all the answers to those. Um, so now we're going to go right into shipping names, proper shipping names. This is the name that is universal. It's everyone in the world uses the same names to identify and mark these packages for transport. So we're going to go over how they're listed, what they look like. So on every box that you ship that has category A, category B, dry ice, it will be accompanied by the UN number and the proper shipping name. We'll go through examples. These UN numbers don't change. Every time you have a category A affecting humans, it's UN 2814, category B, UN 3373, dry ice, UN 1845. So those UN numbers are always going to be on the outside of your box. We're not going to deal too much with medical waste, but it's in here too. And then accompanying every UN number is the proper shipping name, which for category A is infectious substance affecting humans, or category B, biological substance, category B, or for dry ice, you have two options, but you can't mix and match. It's either dry ice or carbon dioxide solid. Um, these do not change. They need to be with the UN number on the outside of every box, and we'll talk about that more. But they always need to be, you can't abbreviate this, like you couldn't say like INF dot substance affecting humans. No abbreviations, no alterations. They have to, this is just the way they are. This is the way they have to be. So category A, we just talked about this. This is what it will look like on the outside of the box. I put an asterisk here um, because somewhere within your package, you have to include the name of what you're shipping. So like if you're shipping Mycobacterium tuberculosis, that's category A. There's an asterisk here because it either needs to be on the shipping documentation or the outside of the box. Not every scenario um, will you want to be putting what you're shipping on the outside of the box, and that's for biosecurity reasons. You don't want these things to fall into nefarious hands, but it does need to be included on the shipping documentation. We'll talk about that more. So then we got category B, UN 3373, biological substance category B. And then here's our dry ice. So you have two options for dry ice, but you have to pick one and stick with it. So this is another quick uh, example or little training thing that I'm going to let you pause here and you can run through these and see if you find anything wrong with these. So you can do that now, and then I'll just talk through them briefly. Okay, so if you come to the end, maybe you found that none of these are acceptable, and we'll talk about why. This first one, UN 2814, infectious substance affecting humans and animals. Can't have that. Animals. UN 2900 is for animals. Um, so that's wrong. The second one, UN 3373 biological substance, Cat B. Like I said, you can't abbreviate things. You got to spell them out. Number three, UN 1845 solid dry ice. Um, you got two options for dry ice. You can either say dry ice or carbon dioxide, comma solid. You can't mix and match. And then this last one, UN 3373 infectious substance category B. Uh, Category B is a biological substance, not an infectious substance. Category B needs to be fully spelled out. So the answer there, none of these are acceptable. Okay, so that's classification and identification. You've got your 9 classes of dangerous goods. We talked about that at length. Category A and B are determined, kind of by those indicative lists, but those are just examples and they're not exhaustive. So, um, find a second source of information before you just go ahead and choose one if you're on the fence. Um, Under both IATA and DOT, there's a third classification group that's not regulated, but IATA throws in exempt human specimens in there. And then their PSN has a corresponding UN number that needs to be accompanied. They need to accompany each other on the box whenever you're shipping. So that's classification and identification. Now we'll talk about packing, marking, and labeling real quick. So this is where we're going to talk about triple packaging, which is what you're going to do with every patient specimen you're shipping ever, no matter if it's category A, category B, or exempt. Um, Category A packaging follows IATA packing instructions 620, and category B follows IATA packing instructions 650. There is exempt packaging. Again, that's for IATA only, exempt human specimens. We'll talk a little bit about dry ice and refrigerants, and then we'll talk about markings and labels. And we'll touch on overpacks just briefly. So the triple packaging. You got a primary receptacle, a secondary package, and a outer package. So your primary receptacle is going to be essentially your specimen. If this is your nasopharyngeal swab in the viral transport media, if this is a tube of blood, if it's urine in a sterile cup, that's going to be your primary receptacle. Your secondary packaging, a durable, watertight, leak-proof packaging with this in here is a little cushioning or absorbent material. Um, Your primary or secondary packaging must be marked with an international biohazard symbol. So in most circumstances, your secondary packaging is just going to be your biohazard bag, which should accompany every patient specimen no matter what anyway, because we're just following good laboratory practice. If you're shipping in the air, your secondary packaging must be capable of withstanding an internal pressure differential of no less than 95 kilopascals without leakage. I'll talk about that more, but just know that that's coming up. Did I? No. And then your outer packaging, once your secondary packaging is decontaminated, the outer packaging must be rigid and protect contents from physical damage while in transit. So you're going to have like cardboard box, a rigid cardboard box, um, styrofoam cooler. But one of the surfaces has to be big enough for all your markings and labels. And put some cushioning material in there if the box is larger than your secondary container. So that's triple packaging, and that's going to be required for all category A, category B, and exempt human specimens. And um, what changes between them is the markings on the outside of the box. So if we're talking packing instructions 620, just went over this. The difference between 620 and 650 on as far as the box goes is for category A, you must have a UN package certification mark. This is going to be stamped on the side of the box. You can kind of see it. It's up here on this one. But this tells the carrier that the box or the box system has undergone stress tests and can withstand, a fall from 6 feet or whatever. It's like 4.5 feet or something. That it can withstand a fall from a specified height and still be structurally sound. There are quantity limits, 50 mils or 50 grams for a passenger aircraft, 4 liters or 4 kilograms for cargo aircraft only. You need to include an itemized list of contents. Everything else up here is just triple packaging like we talked about. So here's a little demonstration. What I didn't talk about on that last slide was the documentation, but we'll cover that more. So you'll notice here, I want to bring this to your attention. We have our primary receptacle here, and the secondary receptacle needs to be watertight, leak-proof, and have that international biohazard symbol. So they got this here as a primary receptacle. They've got some cushioning material. Here's an absorbent pad to soak up any leaks. And then this has got like a rubber gasket on it or something. So this is considered a leak tight or watertight, leak proof secondary container. In Nebraska, we require you to put your primary receptacle into a biohazard bag even before it goes into this cylinder. The category A packages you've been supplied with have this cylinder inside, but we still want that biohazard bag, and that's for the people who are removing the specimen on the other end. Um, so then the specimen, the biohazard bag, and then your cushioning material and absorbent pad, all of that can go into this container, and I'll do a demonstration later. Here's an example of that UN package certification mark. So this will be included on your category A packages. Stamped somewhere on the side just says that this system has been tested and it is up to standards for shipping category A infectious substances. Here's category B, very similar, triple packaging. If you're shipping by air, you need that pressure capable secondary uh, packaging. You still need an itemized list. Things need to be rigid, enough space for your markings and labels. Category B have an upper limit of 4 liters or 4 kilograms. There's no difference between cargo or aircraft passenger. And then you need to have the name and number of somebody, who's sending it. So if you notice here, here's your primary receptacle. That goes into your secondary, um, which is your biohazard bag. And then they just throw this in a box with the itemized list and close it up and send it. Um, I guess we ask that you take a little more care than that. Make sure there's enough cushioning material in there that nothing's going to get, you know, knocked around. The category B boxes that we supply actually have that same cylinder that you saw with the category A, just, a little more security. Um, and then your FedEx label or wherever you're shipping it. So that is the difference between category A and category B. The main thing for the outside of the box, other than like, your UN numbers and your names, is you don't need that UN stamp of approval on the outside of your box for category B. So you can make any box as long as it's rigid and in, pretty good condition into a category B box with the right markings and labels. So that's 650. That's your category B. This is also how you're going to package. I guess that's on the next slide. Exempt human specimens. You're going to follow packing instructions 650, but you don't need all the markings. All you need is a to and a from and your sticker that says exempt human specimen. But you still need that triple package. Um, it needs to meet the requirements of an exempt human specimen. And again, this is only if you're shipping things by air. On the ground, it's not regulated under DOT. And then we got our gel packs or ice packs. We send these out sometimes if you're shipping something cold. Use it with an insulated envelope or something or a styrofoam cooler. Don't use wet ice because obviously it's going to melt and get everywhere. It needs to be outside the secondary packaging. So if you're using one of those canisters, it can go in the canister outside of the biohazard bag. So you're trying to maintain that temperature because some specimens need that. Um, and again, if it's going to be, flying around all over the place, use some packing material to keep everything secure. So then dry ice. If you're going to be shipping more than 5.5 pounds of dry ice or 2.5 kilograms of dry ice by the air, um, you need to be trained and certified in using dry ice. So dry ice needs to allow the gases to be vented. So if you're using one of those systems with the little column or leak-proof cylinder, well, that's watertight. So you can't put the dry ice inside that cylinder with your specimen because the dry ice is going to sublimate, gas is going to build up, and you're turning a category A infectious substance into a category A infectious substance bomb. Um, so styrofoam coolers are fine, with like a lid that fits but isn't strapped down or sealed. Um, you can you need some sort of supports for the interior packaging, and it can't go, like I said, inside that leak-proof packaging. So that's pretty common sense, I think, for dry ice. Something that lets off gas and displaces air. You don't want it to be sealed up tight inside of something. Um, IATA, you can only ship up to 200 kilograms of dry ice, but on the ground, you can ship as much dry ice as you want. Let's see, is there anything else about dry ice? So when you're shipping with dry ice, and I'll mention this later, you need to have on the outside of the package the quantity of dry ice in kilograms. I don't know why. Well, it's international, that's why. Um, you need to have the quantity of dry ice in kilograms, so whoever is carrying it knows how much is in there. So if you only have a scale that does pounds at your facility, you will have to make the conversion. You can't write how many pounds you have on the outside um, of the box. The category A packages we're shipping you are not really meant to be used with dry ice. So if you do need to ship something on dry ice, reach out to us. Um, those are oftentimes specimens that have already been frozen and held for a little while. So um, yeah, contact NPHL with concerns. I am going to do a packing demonstration. I'm going to wait till the end just because I want to also run through the that high consequence disease cooler that went out to the 3 jurisdictional stockpiles. I'm just going to run through the contents and kind of a quick example of how to package it. There are instructions involved, and obviously NPHL is here as a resource uh, should you need it. So as a review, you got the primary receptacle. Please put that in a biohazard bag. Um, and then into this cylinder. So you technically have 2 secondary receptacles. You need to have an absorbent pad. Like I said, if you're shipping with dry ice, it needs to go into some sort of between the secondary and outer packaging. Everything needs to be good in good condition. You need to have that UN symbol for dry or for category A. Um, and otherwise everything just gets triple packaged. So I think we'll take another break there. Let me see what we've got left. Yeah, we'll take another break right here and then we'll finish up and then I'll do that. I'll just do that demonstration real quick at the end. All right, now we're going to talk about marking and labels. These are going to alert the carriers or the recipients of the package as to what is in the package. Um, so the markings, let me move it down here actually. Like I just said, they provide information on the outside of the package as to what's in the package, the nature of the hazard, the packing standards that have been followed to prepare the shipment. Markings include proper shipping names, the UN numbers, like we talked about, the shipper and the consignee. The consignee is who the box is going to, the quantity of dry ice if you're using it, emergency response name and telephone number, which is kind of highlighted up here on the screen. So this, I will make a special point about the responsible person and the telephone number. That person needs to know that the shipment is um, underway, and this 24-hour telephone number can't be, somebody needs to be ready and willing to answer this 24/7 until the package gets where it's going. It can't be a pager or a voicemail or something. Somebody's got to pick that up if the phone rings. So that's an important distinction. The emergency response number, you can put it on a category B, um, but if you include the name and the number on the documents inside the box, you're fine. So then we got labels. These are more pictograph or pictorial labels, and these are, used to indicate a hazard or how the package is supposed to be shipped or handled. Our hazard layer labels, there's, different hazard labels for each of the 9 classes of dangerous goods. These are going to be diagonal, diamond shaped, um, to, draw attention to the label itself because it's kind of askew. Then you got handling labels, which sometimes you need. Orientation arrows tell you which way is up, and then whether this package can go on a cargo aircraft only. Um, like I said, uh, those hazard labels need to remain in their diamond-shaped orientation so they're not easily confused with like the destination or a handling label. Um, Kind of just sets it apart from everything else that's on the box. And then these will be used in some circumstances. Once you hit quantity limits, you're going to start using orientation arrows. Again, same thing with cargo aircraft. We don't really handle too many at least I don't handle too much cryogenic liquid, so I've never actually had to use that one. But just be aware that there's more than just these, but these are the big ones that we're going to talk about today. And this is our, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet. This is our dry ice, our class 9 miscellaneous hazards dry ice label. So if you're shipping a category A on dry ice, you'll have both of these. If you're shipping a category B on dry ice, you'll have both of those. And like I mentioned, the proper shipping names and UN numbers, they need to be on the outside of the box. Remember that asterisk here? You can either put the name of the contents or the name of the organism here or on your documentation. Not always appropriate to have it on the outside of the box. This UN number, which always accompanies the proper shipping name, always accompanies the hazard label, and it's always got to be somewhere near the hazard label. The orientation of this, not as important as the orientation of the hazard label. Like, I mean, don't put it upside down or someplace where it's going to be really hard to read, but it's got to be in the vicinity of the hazard labels. And here's some examples of that orientation. So these are both correct. You see, you got your UN number, which happens to be inside the hazard label, and then you've got your proper shipping name. The proper shipping name can be diagonal like this, or it's just got to be close. What you don't want to do is turn that hazard label on its side. Um, that's grounds for, package rejection, um, if it's not done properly. A little on the bloodborne pathogen standard. This is established by OSHA, and it requires specific warning labels like your biohazard marking on the primary or secondary containers. Not a lot of blood tubes out of the box have a biohazard on them, so usually that secondary container, your biohazard bag, is going to cover this requirement. So, warning labels shall be affixed to containers of regulated waste, refrigerators, or freezers containing blood or other potentially infectious material, and other containers used to store, transport, or ship blood or potentially infectious materials. So that's an OSHA regulation, and that is going to fall under those 5 categories of hazmat training. OSHA requires bloodborne pathogen training because it covers the bloodborne pathogen standard, which is treat every biologic material as potentially infectious. Standard precautions are in use. So that's why we affix the biohazard label, because we're following standard precautions. So quantity limits, kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. If you're shipping a category A on a passenger aircraft, it's got to be less than 50 mils or 50 grams. You can jump up to 4 liters or 4 kilograms for a cargo aircraft. If you have 51 milliliters or 50 grams of category A substance, this sticker then goes on the side of the box. because you've gone over the limit for passenger aircraft. And then USPS obviously doesn't take category A. Category B, your primary container, 1 liter for liquids or 4 kilograms for solids. When we say a whole package here, we're kind of talking about the overpack, which is, packing multiple boxes into one larger box or wrap just to kind of keep everything together. Um, if you're shipping multiple specimens together, um, but 1 liter for a primary container. Orientation arrows, these are required on a category A once you again get past that 50 milliliter, 50 gram mark. When it's or cargo aircraft appropriate only, that's when you have to start putting orientation arrows on. They go on two opposite sides of the package, and they need to point in the direction of the primary receptacle. So I don't know if you package your primary receptacle upside down. These need to point in the direction that the primary receptacle needs to remain. And then, like I talked about, keeping up on the regulations, like how it's, your responsibility to make sure that you're following all the right regulations. Same thing applies to labels. Labels do change. Um, you can see here on a dry ice label, the biggest used to have this line that separated the two, and now it doesn't. And maybe this little border area got a little smaller. But this one's no longer acceptable. So you need to make sure that you're staying up to date on your labels. Same thing with the cargo aircraft. They changed the word danger to say cargo aircraft only and made his hand bigger, maybe. Um, Subtle differences, but got to pay attention to them. Here's the overpack that I talked about. So you can take a whole bunch of category A's and pack them together, and you can use dry ice and all that. So each inner package is restricted to the maximum quantity. So each of these is restricted to 50 milliliters or 50 grams. And the outside package needs to be marked and labeled exactly as all the inner packages. So if this is a category A, we got our orientation arrows. Here's our UN number and proper shipping name, hazard label. Two, our shipper, our consignee, responsible person and number, and overpack. It's got to say overpack on it so people know that there's more than one package on the inside. Um, so yeah, if you're going to package more than one thing together, you put it in overpack, and you could even like put these things on a pallet and wrap them in plastic. If you can see the original labels on the packages, you don't need to do all the labeling on the overpack. But if this is a hard-sided, not see-through, you need to have all the same markings and labels as the inside. So we're marking and labeling. So on the outside of a category A, you got the shipper, or this is a category B, sorry. Shipper, consignee, responsible person again, uh, optional if it's on your paperwork. Hazard label, UN number, proper shipping name. If you're using dry ice, your hazard label, and then you have to have on the outside, well, here's your proper shipping name, and then you have to have how much in kilograms. Orientation are optional unless you get over that 50 milliliter mark for category A. And here you've got your documentation, primary receptacle, secondary, absorbent material, cushioning, and then it all goes inside the box. So we just kind of reviewed that. Um, Big thing, emergency response telephone number needs to be manned 24/7. Um, so that's marking and labeling. Now we're going to talk about documentation quickly, and then we'll do that demonstration and call it a day. So different forms of documentation, and obviously DOT and IATA are going to require different documentation. So we'll talk about the IATA shipper's declaration. I think we talk about that first. The DOT shipping papers, which is similar but different, itemized list of contents, and then shipping labels are just going to be like your FedEx label. So the IATA shippers declaration, this is what it looks like on the right here. This is required for Category A shipments. It requires at least 3 copies. Um, that is one for your records, and the two have to be handed to the carrier. So you keep one for your own records. One goes with the shipper and all the way on to the recipient. You need that 24-hour emergency number that also goes on here on this page, and everything obviously has to be accurate because you do sign a little contract type thing down here and written in some legalese that you declare the contents of this consignment are fully and accurately described above. So you're signing that, and this is signed by the person who packs it. Um, so you're putting your name on there, so you want it to be correct. So if we're talking about the shipper's declaration, um, hold on real fast. I want to bring to your attention this. Sorry, I should have had this up and ready to go. I do apologize for that. So here, okay, so I will include this link or website or whatever. If you're filling out a IATA shipper's declaration, um, there are software. There's software out there that can just help you fill it out. It knows what information you need, where it needs to go. This is one of those things. This is what we use. It's called Safety Pack. Down here, there's this shipping document assistant. You create a user account. It's free. This will help you fill that out accurately and correctly. And it is, if you're shipping by FedEx, you need to use software that is FX18 compliant. That's a FedEx rule. This safety pack software is probably your best bet because it's compliant. It's a good resource and it's free to sign up for. So there is that. I just wanted you to be aware of that. I'll include a link somewhere in the resources. Um, Actually, I think there's a link in the slides that I give out. So where were we? We were on this one. So when you're completing the shipper's declaration, the 3 circled spaces that I have here, you don't technically need to fill these out. Your shipping software might. It's optional. Um, so what you do need is the shipper and the consignee. Definitely not optional. And these transport details in your shipping software, you'll this will be a toggle and you'll choose one or the other, non-radioactive or radioactive. Both are available at the time, but you're crossing out the one that you're not using. So if your package is radioactive, obviously you would not mark that it's non-radioactive. And if this is going on a passenger aircraft, you're going to X out the cargo aircraft only. All of these other things up here are optional. And it says here, 2 completed signed copies of this declaration must be handed to the operator, the carrier. And here I should mention also, and if you're using the software, this will happen automatically, but you need to make sure that you count the total number of pages and mark that. So whoever picks this up knows that this is one of 2 pages, just, in case. Then on the bottom half, um, here's where we'll identify our dangerous good. Your UN ID number, if you're shipping a category A, the proper shipping name. This is where that asterisk comes into play again. Here we have in parentheses, we're shipping hepatitis B virus. So this is where you have the actual name of the organism you're shipping. We're shipping this one on dry ice, so we include that UN number, the proper shipping name. Remember, this could also say carbon dioxide, comma solid. Our class of hazard, 6.2. Dry ice is 9. Total quantity, so we got 25 mils of hepatitis B virus. 2 kilograms of dry ice, and then it's all packed into one fiberboard box. That's our type of packaging. And then our packing instructions, we talked about 620 for category A, 650 for category B. I don't know if I mentioned 954 for category or for dry ice. So then as we move toward the bottom of the page, you'll see this emergency telephone number. This says Chemtrek. You can contract a company to be your 24-hour emergency response person. Um, so if you want to hire a company to be that, or you just want to have somebody, sleep next to the phone, this is acceptable, but they need to have like safety data sheets and information on what you're shipping and how to properly respond to that. Because what's the point of calling the 24-hour number if no one knows what to do if something happened? So they need to have all the information that they're going to be asked when they answer, whoever you're choosing to be this person or company. Um, and then down here, this is the person who's signing it, whatever day this is, and then signature. So if you're using a software for this, I do believe you can use a photocopy of your own signature, or there's some sort of like by initialing here, you've signed this thing and it's a legal document. Um, so my recommendation would be use a shipping software, but this is what an IATA shipper's declaration looks like. And again, IATA, this is for air travel. If it's going on an airplane, this all needs to be filled out correctly. So common errors, if you um, incorrect package description, mixing up packing instructions 620 or 650, um, not completing the form. That's why we use the software to help us, and then getting your proper shipping names wrong. Uh, so that was completing a shipper's declaration. Now, if we're shipping on the ground, DOT requires shippers papers. These are required for category A shipments. So there's an example of one of these in that list of resources that you're going to get. You need a description of your hazardous material. Like up here, you've got your number and your proper shipping name, the quantity, the number of boxes. Um, Special permits is where you add you put your dry ice on here too. You need your emergency response 24 contact number and the shipper's signature. So these, again, you can make these yourself as long as it's got all the required information. But there are examples in the list of resources provided for you to use. And then there needs to be an itemized list of contents um, somewhere between the secondary and outer packaging. Sometimes there are spaces on the secondary packaging for you to write an itemized list of contents. Paperwork that we provide to our laboratories and now local health departments will have on the shippers papers um, an area for an itemized list of contents. So sometimes, yeah, this is included on the shipper's papers. Sometimes this can be included in like the test requisition form. Just somewhere on there, somewhere in the package, it needs to be listed out what you're shipping. The airway bill, I'm not going to talk about because I think as of June 30th, these are no longer going to be used. At least as far as FedEx is concerned, they're getting rid of the paper, or not the paper, the handwritten airway bills in favor of, online shipping schedule. Um, so yep, you can use this instead of an airway bill. This does not have any notations for dangerous goods, but the rest of your box should be indication enough. And so you can use like FedEx software just to, make sure it's got everything. And then this will allow for tracking as well. Okay, so as we kind of just wrap up here, also included in the box should be some sort of like materials safety data sheet. We are including this Guide 158 in the Category A boxes that you'll be receiving. It lists some quick steps to be taken to clean up the spill, or um, it's a step-by-step resource on how to respond, I suppose I should say, and it's very generic. If you can use this if you have a material safety data sheet that's more specific to whatever you're shipping. I would use that instead. But it's just really quick isolation and containment protocols that should be accompanying the package. And then some regulations on incident reporting. If there is an incident involving a spillage of a Category A infectious substance, the National Response Center needs to be notified within 12 hours. Hazardous materials incident report needs to be submitted to the DOT. And if it's the post office, which it's not going to be a Category A, but the post office also needs to be notified. I don't have a ton of resources on notifying the post office or the DOT, but if something should happen, we can find those. This is just for your reference, just kind of tells you what's on the outer packaging for each of our different classes of hazardous material. And that was it for the required documentation. So we're going to take another quick break, and then I will run through just a quick physical demonstration of what things are going to look like when you get your Category A packaging, your Category A packages that we sent out, and a quick rundown of that high consequence disease transport cooler, should it ever be needed. So yeah, I'm just going to take a minute to set up the shipping demonstration. Okay. Now we're going to go through a little Category A triple packaging demonstration, and then we're going to briefly talk about the contents of this high consequence pathogen cooler, and what that's going to look like that needs to get deployed. So these are the Category A boxes. They're very similar to the Category A boxes that your local health department has been outfitted with. Yours won't say exercise only. But you can see you've got your hazard label, your proper shipping name, and the UN number. One comes with the orientation arrows, just like we talked about on each side of the box. Down here at the bottom is our UN stamp that says that this package has gone through testing and it can, withstand the perils of travel. And then you've got a shipper, a box for a shipper, a consignee, a responsible person, and that number. That needs to be a 24-hour number that's answered at any hour, 24 hours. The shipper and the consignee, these are going to be filled out for you. And on the inside of the package, you will find some of that documentation that we talked about. If you're shipping via ground, this is going to include shipping papers, where you're going to have your itemized list of contents. This might be kind of difficult to see, but it's in there. The total number of quantity of plates or tubes, and it's got your shipping description. It's a Category A, so that'll be all filled out. And then down here, or up here, the responsible person, same as the person on the outside of the box, shipper's name, the shipper's signature, and the date. And some brief instructions on the back side of that. Also included is this Guide 158 that we spoke about, just a quick isolation and containment guide should somebody need to respond. And then in the package itself, you'll find our hard-sided container, secondary packaging. Inside of that, we've packaged a biohazard bag, which will, you'll always use that with your primary receptacle. This is an absorbent pad and bubble wrap. So under normal packing circumstances, you'd say maybe you collect a tube of blood
That's going to go primary receptacle into the secondary packaging with the biohazard marker on it. Absorbent material goes between the secondary packaging and the outer packaging. You can wrap that up in the bubble wrap. Then it goes inside the cylindrical container, which does have a biohazard symbol on the top, by the way. So how they're getting away with using this as a secondary package. There's a corrugated cardboard holster in there that just slips in just right like that. And then these are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there will be a clear envelope for your carrier documents on top. Now, we're sending two different styles of category A packaging. So the outside is going to be the same, everything until you get to your cylinder in the second one. You'll find, so generally shoved inside of there, a cooler pack with this white envelope, this large biohazard bag, and then of course the same as the other one, the small one, like that. This is your pressure sensitive shipping system if you're shipping via air. This is that 95 kilopascal resistant shipping system. So again, all right, that's in the way. If you, let's say you've got, a tube of blood, that's going to go inside your secondary packaging. It's going to get wrapped with the absorbent material. These then go inside of the large biohazard bag, which on the outside does contain an area for an itemized list of contents. You're going to expel that bag. There's like a adhesive strip here to seal that down. That goes inside the white Tyvek envelope, which again, adhesive strip, gets sealed. You want to expel the air so you can kind of manipulate the package a little. And then, in no easy sense, however you can get it to fit in there. You can put an ice pack in here with that to keep it cool if it's not temperature sensitive. This can just go inside of your cylinder, sealed, and then back into your box. And so that would be for shipping via the airplane, which then you fall under the regulations of IATA, and they require that pressure resistant packaging. So you will have that available to you, but otherwise, triple package. Please put the biosafety bag. Please put the primary receptacle in a biosafety bag before this hard-sided container. Like I mentioned, these are not suitable for dry ice. If you need to ship dry ice, we will have to figure something different out. So now if we flip on over to our cooler, these are the high consequence pathogen transport coolers. You'll notice on the outside, they've been made to look like a category A with spot for your dry ice hazard and your weight, should you need it. You'll notice that these do not have the UN signification mark on the outside because it's an igloo cooler with room for a couple of beers. There's a second, we talked about the courier exemption earlier. There's a second exemption which says that if a government employee using a government vehicle is transporting these, just like our exempt courier specimens, other than category A, these are not beholden to the regulations of Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, in so many words. So it's not technically a category A package, but since Nebraska State Patrol will be transporting these, it's more for safety than it is for meeting regulations. So on the inside of this cooler,
Again, you've got an insulated wrap, which has got, just like the other category A, your pressure sensitive system and your secondary biohazard bag. Included in this manila envelope are your dry ice labels, should you need them. The mark on the box of where those can go. You'll see those outlined there. You've got a test requisition form, a chain of custody. If these coolers are ever to be used, the chain of custody form needs to be filled out properly. We can talk about that should the time arise. A quick shipping guide, some quick instructions on how to properly package and ship this, as well as contact information for the appropriate people at the DHHS. Another one of those category A shipping papers, and a guide 158 that we've all talked about. In the cooler itself, there is an ice pack. This should be pre-refrigerated before you start to ship, but it is a cooler, so all you need in there is the ice pack if you're trying to keep it cold. There's some bubble wrap, where once you do have your specimen packaged, you can keep it upright in the cooler, and it's not, getting terribly knocked around. Or the cooler itself can be used with dry ice. Just snug your package down into the dry ice, close it, and ship it. In the top, there are these zip tie things, and you'll notice there's these two hooks. You only need one. Record the number of the zip tie on the chain of custody form, and then seal it, and then ensure that that seal is not broken throughout the duration of the transport. Then on the side here, we've got our shipper, the consignee, that's already filled out, that's us. The responsible person, the 24-hour number. So that's the contents of the cooler. You're going to package it just like any other category A, except you're going to be filling out a chain of custody form, and you're going to be placing it in the trunk of the state patrol person's car. And that is it. I am available always by email or phone. If you have any questions, we have the 24-hour emergency pager. If you have an emergency at any time. And otherwise, that will be the end of this packing and shipping experience. Thank you.